Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us today. Just a little bit about Campbell. Campbell's been in business since 1953. Today, we manage over 450 associations, evenly split between condos and HOAs. Many of our clients have very successfully renovated their common areas. And today's focus is HOA Clubhouse Renovations. So if you are in a co-op or a condo, the information will still be valuable to you, but we may not have time to answer questions specific to condos and co-ops, but we will certainly try. Just FYI, most master associations are HOAs if they have at least one HOA as a sub, even if the rest are condos. And so we look forward to sharing this information with you. I'm here today with Lianne Berger from D&B Interiors. She'll be introducing herself in a minute. And our clients have worked very successfully with D&B Interiors on numerous renovations. Here's an agenda of what we're going to cover today. Don't worry, it's a lot of information, but you don't have to write it down. You can just sit back, listen, and enjoy. We will be sending out the slides as well as a recording of the presentation later today. We're going to start a little bit talking about the role of the board and legal considerations, and then we're going to share the survey results so we have a better understanding of who's here today. But basically, when getting started, the board needs to consult their association attorney and refer to their governing documents to understand what the board authority is, limitations on funding, restrictions on the scope of work. And the board, once they have determined these things, should establish a committee and appoint a chair, after which the chair can appoint members of the committee or the board can appoint members depending how you do things in your association. And throughout this presentation today, we're going to share some helpful hints. And one helpful hint we'd like to share right from the beginning is that an interest survey can earn community support from the start. Just to share the results of the survey, today we have about half of the attendees are in an all-age HOA. We've got about 20% that are in an age restricted. We do have 35% in a condo and 1% in a country club, nobody in a co-op. So this is helpful, and we're going to do our best to answer all the questions that we can. And then talking about what people feel the biggest hurdle is to renovations in the community. The number one concern is money, and that's something we're definitely going to spend some time talking about today. And it's a very valid concern because there's got to be a way to pay for the renovations. Number two is getting the votes needed or dealing with challenges and restrictions with the governing documents. And then really number three, not a major concern, is the inconvenience of having the common area closed during renovations. So just keep those things in mind as we go through the program. I'm now going to introduce Lianne, who's going to give you some background on herself and then talk about committee responsibilities.
Hello, my name is Lianne Berger. I'm from D&B Interiors. Today we're going to talk about major clubhouse renovations, which I have a lot of experience in. One of the first things that comes up is putting together a committee. This is very helpful. They're the ones that will start vetting the designer, and the committee will also meet with architects if needed and general contractors. The committee, one of the most helpful things of what the committee can do for me is make a wish list per room of what they think the community needs to have done. So this gives me a better idea of the scope of work that the community is looking for. And when you're choosing a committee, it's helpful to have people with some construction background, design background, and even finance background. So, okay.
All right, I think we just skipped over one thing. Really quickly was the committee responsibilities, but we can go back to that.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. The wish list is very helpful per room. Consider what you can and can't have in your clubhouse. Sometimes people say we want a cafe, but sometimes there's just no room for the cafe. Also, when taking consideration when you're bringing your building up, you want to think about ADA codes for the bathrooms. Maybe no one's using the arts and crafts rooms anymore, repurposing the space for something else. The one big concern I usually get when I'm on these interviews or doing these jobs is storage. When the builders were building these clubhouses, they really didn't think in the future about all the storage needs that these communities have. So we've had to try to come up with bigger ideas for storage. Property manager. Oh, yes. And also, a lot of times, this is funny. Sometimes these offices, they give the property managers are only good for one person when really they need 3 people. So that's very helpful. And when you're doing this, to think about more space for your property management team and for storage.
Perfect. And then we always recommend that you visit new communities to see what things they're offering residents, because that is really good for inspiration. I'm just going to go back to committee responsibilities. Lianne, can you talk about what makes a great committee for this project?
I really strongly believe, and I do like working with the committee because I don't live in your community. You live in your community. So just as if I was going to a residential house, I need to know what your wants and your needs are for your clubhouse moving forward. Because again, maybe you have a billiard room that has 6 tables and you really only need 2 tables, or they want, it's just like when you're living in your house, you evolved and you need to tell people exactly what you're looking for in the renovation. Because again, when I'm done with your renovation, I'm leaving and the clubhouse is yours. So it has to be what you want as a community.
Perfect. And of course, super important to make sure that you recruit the right people for the committee, because that can make the committee so much more effective.
And committees that get along.
That is definitely key. So let's talk about some of the responsibilities of the committee, Lianne.
All right, well, again, as we saw in the poll, the biggest is always money. So it's good to come up with, once we have the scope of the work, then we can put together a budget for what is this going to cost? And that is the biggest thing. And my role is to come in, we work with the committee, we come up with a scope of work. Then once I do that, we come up with a design idea, then I bring in my vendors so we can put together a pretty comprehensive budget before we present it to the board. And the board, the committee makes the recommendation to the board.
And then Lianne, how long would you say this process takes? And of course, it can vary by community and when they start the project, if they started in season, off season, but how long would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. You have 6 to 12 months. I think that's a good timeline, but sometimes it's longer, depending on the scale of the renovation. Some communities I've been to, they just want to do a beautification. Other ones want to do a total gut job. So those take a lot more time.
Perfect. And then of course, the more input you have, the better. And depending on what other committees exist in your community, you may be also making presentations not only to the board, but also to those committees, the finance committee, the insurance committee, perhaps the legal committee, the cafe committee, if that's part of your scope of work, the communications committee, because it's really important to communicate timely information to residents. So definitely whoever is on that committee is going to be very busy for a little while. Let's talk about community buy-in. This is really, really important because if you don't have community buy-in from the start, the project is going to be extremely difficult. This is where you rely on your manager or your management company to assist, do some town halls, do some surveys, get some feedback, maybe have some, little focus groups. Realtors certainly have a lot of valuable input because they see every clubhouse in town and they know what works with residents and buyers and what doesn't. And it's also really important to understand from the beginning what your quorum is, because this can vary greatly from one community to the next, and understand how many votes are needed to move the project forward and by whom. Super, super important. And really, it's really critical to identify major concerns as soon as possible in the process and try to understand what's behind those concerns so you can propose solutions early on and ease people's minds, let them know that the clubhouse is going to have something to offer for everybody. Talking a little bit more about community buy-in. Definitely, Q&A sessions are really important, and you do have to go to those meetings, prepare with information, cost per unit, discussions on the design, how modern is too modern, how long has it been since the last renovation, all those types of things. And you have to allow time to get this input and schedule these meetings so that you're reaching as many people as possible. You do not want anybody to ever feel left out of the process. And of course, we always recommend keeping in mind a preventive maintenance program and a plan as to how you're going to keep your clubhouse looking fresh and new for as long as possible. Preparing to launch. So the committee has met, input has been gathered, recommendations have been made. It's really up to the board at this point to make the go, no-go decision on which options to present. The next step is typically a community vote that usually requires 14-day notice. And again, you really want to make sure you understand the quorum required by your documents. Electronic voting is always super helpful on something like this. So you do make sure that you get the quorum. And there's 3 different outcomes that we have all seen. One outcome is where there's no quorum and you don't have enough participation. You can adjourn the meeting for 90 days to gather the additional votes needed. A quorum with a no outcome, that happens sometimes. And sometimes it could take 2 or 3 times before the project is voted upon successfully. And so you just learn from the experience and prepare to do it again. And of course, the quorum with a yes outcome. And sometimes this could happen by 1 vote. We've seen that. And now the hard work begins. But it's really important that you don't schedule the vote unless there's been adequate communication and community input. You don't want to rush it. A little bit about contracts. Really important to have all contracts reviewed by your association attorney, have them check the termination clauses, the expectations on insurance, subcontractors, and all of those types of things. And what's really key is to make sure that the work is always ahead of the payments. You never want to be too far ahead with the payments and not so far ahead with the work. That's not a good situation. Contingency plans and protections are always good to have because things do happen. And safety protocols. A lot of times with these clubhouse renovations, there are air quality issues, and you really don't want people in the clubhouse when this work is being done. It's hazardous. And then finally, additional things to think about from a legal perspective or a contract perspective are things like liquor licenses. If you're planning on expanding your food and beverage, you might have to take a look at your liquor license if you have one, or get one if you don't, to make sure that everything is going to be ready to go by the time your clubhouse has the grand reopening. And I've got a picture of Mayhem here. We all know Mayhem from those TV commercials and the havoc that he creates, but nothing good ever comes out of the money that you might save by not having your attorney review a contract. As attorneys like to say, it's easier to keep you out of trouble than get you out of trouble. I'm going to turn it back over to Lianne now to talk a little bit about the construction process.
So you need to think about, it depends on the scope of work of how long your clubhouse will be closed. If you're doing a big project, it could be anywhere to 8 to 12 months, depending on what your scope of work is. You need to think about, big thing is, can the staff stay in the building or not stay in the building? Again, I think it's not always a safety issue. You might have to relocate the staff. One job we recently did, they got them trailers, air-conditioned trailers, so they could stay on site. The other big thing is the staff helps get all the furnishings away. There are companies that will come in and help you auction off all your things that you do no longer need. And also, I always put in a contingency in our contract for overages or change orders, because you never know what happens in a job. It is called construction. And we do provide to our HOAs all the warranties and all the fire marshal also needs us to have all the fire ratings. So we do gather all that information, give it to the property manager. And we do usually have numerous meetings with the committee or who's ever in charge of us to check the progress. And I was always giving email blasts to my main person, and she would share that with the community.
That's great. You can never communicate too much when you've got a project of this scale going on. So Lianne, tell us how we can kind of keep things normal in the community while this project is happening.
Well, the big thing, like when we were doing Coral Lakes, was what took a lot of planning is that you have a lot of, events in their theater. So we had to plan when was going to be a good time to be closed down. So if they had some events that they did go to neighboring communities and they would share their theater with them. Also, like I said, one community had set up tents and trailers. It was a country club, so they could still maintain the food service. Funny enough, the restrooms, this really is a big issue, especially if the staff is still on site. The last project we just did, we did it in stages. We did the one big clubhouse, but we left the other part of the pool area still open, so the staff and whoever was using the pool still had a restroom. So believe it or not, that is a very big consideration. And like I said, talk about sharing spaces, renting, relocating. It's a lot of coordination, and really that's really where the property manager really comes in. And you're saying on here, consider Zoom, which is a great idea also for different webinars and keeping in touch with each other.
We know that a lot of our communities could have a couple thousand events a year when you think about the shows and the clubs and the card games and the sports events. It's a lot of things to keep track of. It's a lot of things to find alternate locations for. And this is where we have a lot of communities that are very good neighbors, and they understand that a particular clubhouse is under renovation, and they make an arrangement with the neighboring community for the residents to use some of those amenities, because maybe they are planning a renovation as well, and then the other community will have the opportunity to return the favor. This is a great time to get creative and be open-minded, because aside from other communities, there are lots of places nearby your HOA that have space available to relocate some of these events. So things don't have to come to a stop. The fun can still go on and happen. Just need to be a little creative when figuring out how it will logistically work. And Lianne, what if something goes wrong? Things never go wrong, right? Never. Everything always goes smoothly.
It is called construction for a reason. We find things that we don't want to find. For example, sometimes you're taking up a floor, more than the floor comes up. Kitchen complications you have here, like when the vent doesn't vent to anything. Structural issues we had recently where we had termites in the trusses. And you have on here the vendor problems. We did recently with the drywall guy had an emergency, so we had to pull in another team to do the work. So these things all do come up. And what I did mention before about the bathrooms are very challenging because those codes do change. It's very fluid. And we just did another clubhouse and we had to make some concessions to be up to code with the new changes. And code changes can be on a yearly basis. But sometimes you are grandfathered in depending on the structure. So that's when you need the architect to really be in place, to know what exactly needs to be done per code.
Yes, and actually, I'm just going to go back a minute to talk about technology and modernization. And we've got some before and after pictures here from Coral Lakes to demonstrate how even in the restroom, technology can just be leveraged to make everything better. So we've got touchless entry at the door, touchless faucets and soap dispensers, energy efficient so that when nobody's in the restroom, the lights go off. Aromatherapy in the restroom. There's a lot of different ways that you can leverage technology just to make everything better. And then let's see, let's go to do's and don'ts. Lianne, can you share with us from your vast experience some of the do's and don'ts of these type of renovations?
Again, depending on your scope of work, you might want to hire, especially on the very, very large projects, hire a project manager. They were very helpful at Coral Lakes. Not only were we a lot to look after, but also the committee, the board. So it was very good to have them involved. We had architects involved. We had the GC involved. We had permits pulled. So they were a very integral part of the project. And you're saying define and stick to the scope of work, which is great because sometimes they say, well, let's at the last minute renovate the kitchen that wasn't going to be renovated. That takes more money, that takes more time. So you have to keep that into consideration. Again, know your budget. That's where the finance committee and the treasurers have always, and the property manager, you need to very much need to look at the budget. It's not that we're only the ones going over budget. They might say, well, again, maybe we didn't have the poker tables in the budget, but now we want 6 new poker tables. Well, where is that money coming from? So those are things you need to consider. Again, the property management team is integral in these big renovations because they have to keep everything running smoothly. Again, the costs. I always have a good idea of the scope of work going in, but as the project's moving along, and this has happened in the past, all of a sudden the staff wants all new custom-made built-in furniture. Well, that's something to take into consideration. And depending which city or county, depends on how the permits run. We've been very lucky with Palm Beach County. But that's where a good GC comes into play. Yeah, hurricanes can definitely disrupt a renovation. Not only are we going to get hit with one, but they have to close the clubhouse. They have to get ready for the hurricane, even if it doesn't come. So that takes a lot of time. and expect.
So yeah, Lianne, for a hurricane that comes and creates some damage, but not extensive damage, how much time delay would you say that might add to a project?
Well, that's happened in the past where maybe they lose power for 2 weeks. And maybe they didn't have minimal damage, but what happens is, as you know, we've had these big hurricanes come in and people leave. Like your vendors could take off for a week or two. So it definitely disrupts the whole schedule. And maybe a lot of trees come down, or maybe a roof got damaged. It's a lot can happen. So when they say this is your target date, I'm like, well, maybe not. It all depends if everything goes smoothly or not.
Thank you, Lianne. And we had some questions that were submitted prior to the webinar regarding project managers and how are they paid, or how are their payments structured? Is it a percent of the project? Is it a flat rate? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, normally they do come up with a percentage, and they are sometimes, it depends on when they are hired, because if they don't know the budget yet, because they might be asked to come in early at the very beginning and to help with the selections of the committee, help putting the scope of the work together, and help implement all that work. So they might come up with either a percentage or a flat rate, depending on when they come into the project.
Very helpful. Thank you. And a few more do's and don'ts, Lianne.
Yeah, so one was funny. We came into one project and they wanted everything to be neutral and all the taupes and the grays and everything one color. And the committee before them had just purchased 350 red banquet chairs, which we had to incorporate. So think about that. And you can't just go and buy furniture on Wayfair. It has to be grade, commercial grade furniture. You're just wasting your money. You have to make sure the fabrics are good for, high traffic. And the biggest, I was telling the ladies this earlier, the biggest thing with these clubhouses, besides the bathrooms, the biggest hurdle we have is the ladies' card room chairs. Not everyone is, 5'4" and 120 pounds. So this is a big issue for us. Do they want casters? How deep is the chair? Do I need a pillow for my back? So we always provide samples of those chairs before making this very big purchase. And you're saying do update. Well, we provide our insurance policies. We have all our coverage, and we provide all our vendors coverage as well. So we always have certificate of occupancies, and we share that with the property manager before anybody enters the job site.
And then, of course, you want to update your association carrier after the project is done so that they know about everything that has been updated as well. Lianne, what type of documentation should managers and lifestyle directors have to provide to the insurance to update the policy? What types of things do you recommend?
Well, to update your policy, I mean, you're putting in, sometimes it goes hand in hand. A lot of times it's a new roof. Sometimes they put in new hurricane windows that will help your insurance. We do put in, I like to put in floors with high cohesion so that it's not as slippery. So, and then the bathrooms are all updated to ADA. So I would submit to the insurance company pretty much the whole scope of work of what you did in the clubhouse to see if that benefits your insurance policies.
Thank you. Very helpful. And Lianne, what would you say would be a good rule of thumb about happiness and satisfaction with the project?
So everyone is so funny. So while we're in the process of getting the scope of work together and presenting to the community, no one really does like change too much. And then a lot of people are, nervous about what we're going to do. And then we always have a big grand opening party at the end, and everybody, all of them are extremely happy in my experience. They don't remember that we moved the billiard room to the ladies' card room. They don't remember that we made the art room smaller. So these are things like once it's done and they have the grand reveal, pretty much everyone's very happy. They have a new, fresh, gorgeous clubhouse to be proud of.
Thank you. That's reassuring. So you talked about a grand reopening. Definitely, this is something that you want to plan for, have funds for a celebration, for a reopening or a ribbon cutting. When you're planning the event date, keep in mind any contingencies that might happen. And really, this is, of course, a big show for everyone to see, but also to thank the residents and have some gratitude for their patience during the whole renovation process, because it can seem like a very long time. Maybe there are companies that would like to give back to your community that might be interested in sponsoring a ribbon cutting or an event, so don't overlook that. Make sure again that the date and time is well communicated, and include some surprises for your residents, things that they might not be expecting, maybe something in the way of food or drink or entertainment, something just to add a little bit of interest and just keep everything fun. And we have a lot of communities that after the grand opening, they actually have scheduled guided tours of the building so that residents and their guests and realtors and anybody else can come and take a tour and see everything that was done, and just really get to enjoy it. And really, a lot of people were inconvenienced during the process, but like Lianne mentioned, very genuinely excited when the clubhouse has the reopening, because this is a really important of their life there in the community. So we have some comments in closing, and we've got a great before and after of some of D&B's work at Ponte Vecchio and Boynton Beach, which is not a Campbell property, but another property that D&B has worked with. And, basically the clubhouse is an extension for a lot of people. It's an extension of their home, and it adds to the home values and quality of life in the community. So to make sure that the project goes well, definitely an active and engaged board that has a good understanding of their governing documents, input from professionals like your attorney, your insurance agent, and others. Having a really solid, well put together community that works well together, like Lianne said. And really important is that community buy-in. And remembering that the clubhouse closure doesn't have to be the end of activities and fun in the community. There's more ways to have fun and different ways to make sure everyone's needs are met. And just seeing the end result is going to make this all worthwhile. So now we're going to open it up to questions and answers. Sorry about that. I'm going to stop sharing. And let me see. We've got a few questions already. Okay, some HOA governing documents have a limit on the dollar amount a board can spend. Any more requires an owner vote. That's definitely true. Yes, the clubhouse is not just an amenity, it's an asset, and that it does need to be maintained like any other capital asset. We completely agree. And yes, it really is important, and it is the responsibility that the clubhouse be kept up and maintained. You can't, unfortunately, let it go. And the longer you let it go, the more expensive it's going to be to bring it back. Okay, how do you distinguish between renovation and material alteration? This mainly applies to condos, but some HOAs do have this language in their documents, and that's something you definitely want to consult with your association attorney about. But most renovations are material alterations, so there's no way to get around that. Getting a 75% vote of the membership, definitely allow them input from the beginning, lots of communication throughout the process, and make sure they understand that there's going to really be something for everybody and benefits in doing this project. It is hard to get 75% of the membership to agree to anything, including the fact that the sky is blue. Yes, Joel, but that is where electronic voting can help, because that can really drive engagement and increase the numbers. Typically, when communities utilize electronic voting, the response is much greater than with your typical paper ballots. Okay, let's see. We're trying to get design ideas for our renovation project, but most interior designers will not put a design together unless we sign a contract to use them for the project. Lianne, would you like to talk about this? I'm sure this comes up quite a bit for you.
I think that's a normal process because coming up with the design, we put in a tremendous amount of work and time to come up with the design process. And even if you're doing your own home, we designers do like to be paid up front just to know that you're committed to us, because it is a big job for us to do that. So that is a normal process.
And the rest of the question, how do you get design options? In the meantime, definitely tour new communities.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
And even if, maybe you're out of town, you're not here all year round, you can still look online. We're very fortunate in our area. We have no shortage of brand new communities with amazing amenities. So just take a look at that, do some research and see what other communities are offering, because from a real estate perspective, those communities are kind of competition. People are looking at lots of different places when they are looking to purchase a home, and the clubhouse and the amenities definitely is a big part of that decision. Okay, please make it clear this is for an HOA, not a condo. Typically, there is nothing owned in common in an HOA. The board owns and controls everything. That's not accurate. In an HOA, everybody owns a portion of the common area, not a portion that you could, carve out on the grass and identify, but the clubhouse belongs to everybody. There is no such thing as material alteration for an HOA. That truly depends on your governing documents. And unless limited by the documents, the HOA board can do what it wants, shut down the hot tub, close the bar, etc. Your board is elected, so hopefully you are voting for and electing people that have the best interest of the community at heart and are going to make the best decisions that they can make at the time with the information that they have. Okay, I have a great question for Lianne. Are bathrooms in an HOA community required to be ADA compliant?
Yes, if it's so. For example, when we can do that, and so sometimes we worked in the smaller bathrooms and we don't have the 5.5-foot turnaround that is needed, the architect has gone back and we do get grandfathered in for that. But if you have the room, you're going to get changed to the ADA rules.
And what about the fitness room, Lianne?
For ADA?
Yes.
I've never heard that. I've never.
That does come up a lot, because people like to add new pieces of equipment when they're renovating. And it is really important that the fitness room is also ADA compliant and that there is that turn radius for individuals to get around the pieces of equipment.
Yeah,
that's
how much room you have.
Yes.
The smaller communities just don't have the room, but if you have the room, then you should be compliant. Definitely.
That's a good example of something that would be really valuable, to have a fitness professional come and take a look at your interior designer can help you design the aesthetics of the room, but having a consultant help you lay out the equipment within the room and tell you how many pieces might be too many for the room size that you have, that has a lot of value. Okay, here's a fun one. What are your thoughts on fake plants?
Well, I like them because you don't have to maintain them. And I do buy I have a really good source. We use them at Coral Lakes. They look really good. You want good quality silk plants. You're not going to pick them up at Home Goods, even though sometimes they have nice ones. But you don't have to maintain them, because I've seen in the past where they've ruined the flooring underneath when the people are watering the plants and they're not maintained properly. So that can be another issue.
Okay, and here's one, hosting HOA meetings during the construction, where to host them.
We did.
Lianne, yes.
We were lucky at Coral Lakes because they did it in phases. So we had, they left the theater for last, so we had access to the theater. So that was one place. Another place they did have, again, when we just did Point Vecchio, we did the exercise pavilion last. So we had that area. And same thing with Avalon Estates. They did it in phases. A lot of times these communities, which is lucky, they have their exercise pavilions and they're not attached to the main building. And some communities have a separate cafe also. So we've always managed, or we sit by the pool.
Or the parking lot, or on Zoom.
Yeah, normally we try to keep the pool open during the renovation and close at the very last, and we try to minimize that because that's a big amenity that we don't want to take away from the residents.
Definitely. So at what point, Lianne, do you suggest setting the overall budget for the project? So Greg has a question that the soft costs to come up with the ideas are just killing them, and nobody wants to vote on the project till they know what it will cost, but they don't want to vote until they know what it will look like. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg. Where do you recommend people start?
This is what happens. So people do hire a professional designer like me, like our company, to come in, and usually this is how it works. Way your docs are written, you'll interview 3 designers, you'll pick one, and we do present a contract just to hire us and to give idea of what our fee structure is. And there is an upfront charge, and in that charge will be renderings, ID drawings, meeting with vendors, and then putting the budget together, because you may not know if you're going to spend 800,000 or $3 million. It depends on the scope of work and what needs to be done and how much work you want to do. And it always comes down to money. Do we have the money? This comes up a lot. Can we work with the existing floor? Can we do this? How can we save money? We only want to assess everyone this amount. What can we do for that amount? Can we get there? So that's also something you can put into the puzzle. But you should, and honestly, like, some of these processes take so long, you're going to have to update your budget. Sometimes this process could take 2 years. So by the time you get to the end to go start, you might want to rethink your budget because a lot has happened in the last 2 years. For example,
not to mention, yes, inflation, hurricanes in other areas that might drive
right.
us
HOA insurance is more now, right?
Yes, that as well. And Lianne, how do you avoid over improving or under improving? How do you know what's just right?
Question. That is such a good question, because I go in and I tell people you don't want to go and ask people for money and not do enough. They might get insulted. Like, why are you doing this renovation? You don't want to do it too cheap, but you don't want to go crazy either. That's why it's good to hire a professional, because that's a fine line you need to be in, because you want to do enough so people don't feel annoyed that you did all this work and it wasn't meeting their expectations.
Thank you. And we've got a question for you, Lianne. Do you recommend that the interior designer serve as the project manager?
Well, it depends on the renovation. You know, it depends. Like if I'm doing like a $5 million renovation, then I think you need a project manager. But if I'm going in and just doing beautification, you know, I'm just doing new carpet, new furniture, I'm not doing major renovation, then I do not think you need a property, you know, project manager. But if you're doing major things, I think you do. And I think,
Like, yeah,
yeah,
like structural things, if your
yeah,
clubhouse has elevators, if you've
right,
got
right.
roofing.
Because they also help, with the billing, making sure we have the insurance, vetting the vendors we're using. But if I'm just going in, I'm giving you new carpet and paint and furniture, then that's a waste of money, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let me ask you, a lot of times these things start off as, well, we're just going to refresh everything a little bit. At what point or at what age would you say things are beyond just refreshing and do require that more advanced renovation?
Well, 12 to normally what I've seen in these communities is every 12 to 15 years. Now, I was working with one community that's, you know, hasn't done anything in 25 years since it's been open. So again, they're going to be spending a lot more money because they haven't, it's just like your home. You're not maintaining it and keeping it up, then that's what's going to happen. But it depends. It depends because sometimes I go in there and they're like, for example, the gym is not big enough. We have this fitness room. It's a joke. So now they want to do major renovation. So that's a whole different story because the builders built all these, but now now all the residents are using it. And is it meeting their needs? You know, maybe they only have one card room. They want 3 card rooms. Maybe they have too many billiard tables. What can we do? And that's when we start moving rooms around and really streamlining the clubhouse for the needs that people currently want. Again, like the pickleballs. Everyone wants 20 pickleball courts, so that comes up a lot.
Yes, that's a hot topic,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Okay, we've got another question. We have been told by an attorney that we don't need to be ADA compliant unless we're a public facility. Is that true?
Are
I
you a
think
country club? I mean, that's the only where I would see, but my understanding with the clubhouses that we work on, you need to be ADA compliant. I would find it hard to believe that even in the country club that you don't have to be.
I agree, and I have been aware of instances where testers come in to the community to test and see whether or not it is ADA compliant. And if it is not, the association can get a fine and a demand to bring the facility up to code. So definitely something you want to discuss with your association attorney, but probably not something you would be able to get a waiver from unless there was very specific.
Architect, honestly.
Yes. And speaking of architects, we've got another question. Knowing that you will need an architect for the structural renovation, adding outbuildings, etc., why add a designer? What role does the designer play in the whole process with other vendors?
Well, this is how I work. I do have an architect and he is licensed and we need him for the permit. And I strongly recommend you get a permit when you're doing these major renovations. Your insurance company is going to expect you to have gotten a permit. So you could get into big trouble by not doing that. So the architect has his role, the interior designer has their role, and the GC has their role. Sometimes you might need an engineer, but I haven't run across that much unless you're doing an addition. We did one clubhouse where they added a whole ballroom, so that everyone has their hat that they wear in this process.
Thank you. And let's see. we just have time for another couple of questions. So if you have any more and you can type them in quickly, we can get to them. Somebody says, regarding the ADA, we're a condo clubhouse, owners only, not open to the public with no public amenities inside. Unless you ban anybody from bringing any guests into your facility, it's not owners only and it's not closed to the public. Okay, and let me see. Some HOAs have sold off their clubhouse, pool, and rec facilities and no longer own them. Yes, we've seen a trend of that. Some institutional investors have come in and bought clubhouses, golf courses, with pretty good results because they end up completely renovating the clubhouse at their own expense. They renovate the golf course, and it is something that benefits everybody because typically, you know, the residents are not funding this tremendous expense. Yes, there's an inconvenience or a factor to not owning your clubhouse anymore, but it can go both ways. There's some good advantages to that as well. So if there are no more questions, I think we're going to conclude this. I just want to thank everybody so much for coming. We're going to send out a video, send out the slides, send out our contact information. Lianne is very accessible and always happy to talk to people, very friendly. We'll answer all your questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Really great seeing everybody.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.